What's cracking, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. New video. So this morning I was going through some of the comments on my last video, right? And I believe it was Ezekiel. Ezekiel asked me, "How about if I read a book by about this dude Chunky?" Chunky wrote a book, or somebody wrote a book based off of Chunky's events or Chunky's version of events, right? And I left him a comment and I decided, you know what, I want to make a video about it. And the reason why is because I've spoken about Chunky in the past. I told a funny story of when he got the homies together to play against the Woods, play flag football against the Woods. And at one point, he told the homies the Woods had scored a touchdown and they were about to kick the ball off, which, throw the ball, to kick the ball off. And he was telling all the homies, "Give me the ball." And Chunky wasn't a skinny dude, right? And he said, "Give me the ball." And the homies were like, "Nah, fool." And but he was the one gambling, right? And so they gave him the ball and they blocked for him. And he took off and he got to like the 50-yard line. And there was only one Wood left that could get to him, Joe. And Joe dove to grab his flag and instead ripped his boxers off his body. And Chunky's fat ass had to run the next 50 yards to score the touchdown. And all he had on was shoes and socks and his flags around his waist. The whole yard was laughing. It was a funny moment, right? So I've told that story. I told another story of him, right? But I won't read his book. Ezekiel said, "How about if I read his book chapter by chapter and then break it down, what I know, what I feel." And I won't do that. I knew Chunky personally. There was a time where Chunky and I were pretty close. And I told this story. He was selling dope for another homie on the yard. When you are selling dope for a homie, that dope is hot, by the way, right? Meaning it's for the legends, right? When you accept the job to sell for somebody, anytime something goes sideways with one of the people you sold to, it's your responsibility to whack that dude, to make that right. However you have to make it right with a homie that you got the dope from, that's what needs to happen. And the guy Chunky was selling for on the yard, I didn't like him. We couldn't stand each other, right? And he was a really petty dude. That's why we had a falling out. And so Chunky sold to somebody. This guy always had a deadline. You have X amount of days. If you haven't paid in that amount of days, then something's going to happen. And the Wood that he had sold to was actually somebody that I was really cool with. And he missed the deadline. And he said, "Hey, man, I'll give you some canteen just to, hold you off." But the guy that Chunky accepted the dope from, he's like, "Nah, he got to go. Whack him." He accepted his canteen, though, and then said, "Whack him," right? At the time, Chunky and I were real close. So if Chunky's going to go do that, I'm going with him. Because that's what happens when you're close to somebody. If that's your dog right there, then they're going to go on a Harley. You go with them. So we were going to whack him first yard. It's Chunky's Harley. I'm going to follow suit. As soon as he starts whacking him, I'm whacking him with him. But this is Chunky's thing. He's got to initiate, right? He doesn't hit him. Yard recall. We go in. I told him, "Hey, Holmes, I'm coming back out. I'm going to sneak out for second yard, Holmes." I said, "We got to hit him as soon as yard comes out. Fuck all that waiting, Holmes." He's like, "All right, cool." Chunky had been waiting to get some time back, right? So second yard comes out. I come out. I tell him, hey, let's go right now, Holmes. Let's just whack this dude. And he's like, nah, hey, trip out on this. He says, remember that time I've been waiting on? I said, yeah. He goes, they gave it back to me. The counselor called me in the office in between yards, and I'll be going home in like 90 days. I said, man, fuck all that, Holmes. You got an obligation, man. Let's go whack this dude and worry about that later. He's like, hell nah. He goes, you don't even like that, Vato. Eh? Like, why you tripping? And long story short, I told him, hey, Holmes, it don't matter how much time you got left. You're gonna do it looking over your shoulder. I said, and you're a fuck up. I said, you will be back, and you're gonna have to look over your shoulder. I said, nobody wants to do time like that. Chunky didn't do it. Chunky didn't do it, and that's when he and I were no longer close. I was a knucklehead, and he had just proven to me that he wasn't. So I kept him at a distance. You know, we all right on. That was about it between us. And then later, tweaked out, he whacks a homie that did nothing wrong. He goes to AdSeg. At the time, AdSeg they didn't have the standalone unit that they have now in New Folsom. At the time, it was A5 and A6, and they had overflow in A7. You didn't want to land in A7, but if you did, they'd get you out of there fast, right? Chunky went to A6. I wound up in A5. There was a legend there at the time, and Chunky wound up being his celly. The homie that got hit, he didn't cooperate. They don't have cameras, right? They only have one camera on the yard in New Folsom, back then at least. The camera wasn't on what happened. So Chunky beat the 115. He beat the write-up. He beat the stabbing that he did, right? He knows he's going home. And he made promises to his celly. A made guy. He made promises to him. He got out. And not only did he break the promises, but he did some extremely disrespectful stuff. He did some stuff to where he was public enemy number one. He wound up getting busted, and he went into protective custody. And from what we were told, he joined a PC gang. And then he flipped on those guys. Wound up telling on them. So Chunky was okay for like a point in time, right? Very short time. Somebody in his life was taken out. And when that happened to him, something changed in his brain. I saw it happen, but it doesn't justify what he did. He didn't have to make the promises when he knew he had ill intent when he did. Chunky turned on every person in that world that was good to him. And then he wrote a book, or he told his story to somebody, and that person writes books, right? And there's people that have read the book that have been in my comments, right? And me personally, I would never read his book to hear his version of events, because I know he would only be justifying all the foul shit he did to people who were good to him. And I know there's going to be people that'll say, well, how could somebody in prison really be good for someone else? Well, believe it or not, it's true. Friends become enemies a lot in there. Enemies can sometimes become allies. That's prison. That's what I always try to convey to you guys. But there were people that were good to Chunky. I was there. And Chunky fucked them over. His book would be some kind of sugar coating. You can dip a turd in gold and it's just some shiny shit, man. And that's what his book probably is. That's my video for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Everybody, please be safe, be smart, and tell the ones you love that you love them, man. I'm out of here.